Hi, so welcome back to my journey and my spiritual awakening and developing subconscious surgery. And kind of left off last time with my journey of my youth, really. You know, my experiences when I was young and how I would read people and tell people about things about themselves, and some of it would be received and some of it I'd be attacked back because they weren't ready for it. And in many ways that kind of made me hide my gift. And it was still there. I still felt people, I still saw people's intentions, and in some ways, you know, one of my early recollections was knowing what people were going to do and what their intentions were, and in usually extreme moments, knowing exactly what to say and what to do to circumnavigate that. I remember one time so one part about me which not many people know about, you know, it's kind of interesting. People profile, you know, by how you look and what you do and all that kind of stuff. And I've always been an entrepreneur. As I said in my last video, I started buying and selling, you know, high-end audio when I was very young. I was kind of 12, 13, 14 when I started, you know, buying it as such. I was kind of 10, 11 when my dad introduced me to home hi-fi, and that's kind of where I got the bug. But by the time I was sort of like 16, 17, I was buying high-end home audio equipment for my house. At 18, I had a home hi-fi system which was worth about, I think in that day's money, about 20,000. I mean, some of my cables were worth several thousand, and a lot of the money that I earned as an entrepreneur wasn't necessarily in alignment with what the powers, you know, so to speak, would have been approving of. So when I was 16, I kind of started dealing in a little bit of weed, a bit of smoke. I mean, it's kind of funny when we look at laws and legalities and what's wrong and right. And this has been happening in America a lot, you know, especially in things like San Francisco, California, and things like that, where loads of kids and, you know, people and adults got arrested for dealing in weed. But then when they made weed legal, they actually went retrospective and started turning around and exonerating lots of marijuana and cannabis crimes, because it seemed hypocritical for it to be now legal and still people be in jail for dealing in, you know, and it's no longer a crime. But in my entrepreneurial ways, I mean, I started smoking weed when I was probably about 14. And when I was 16, I was buying and selling it in smallish amounts. By the time I was 17 and 18, I was kind of moving it in big amounts, kilos at a time. I started raving and all that kind of stuff, and ended up meeting, obviously, you know, they say marijuana is a gateway drug, and it's not a gateway drug at all. This was proven in Amsterdam, when they legalized marijuana and made it, you know, more available to the general public. The use of Class A's and, you know, more potent drugs went down. In fact, crime went down. And the only reason why it was a gateway drug is because the people that sold marijuana sold crack cocaine, sold heroin, sold ecstasy, sold methamphetamines and all that kind of stuff. And it was the association of it which was the gateway. You're buying weed and then he goes, try one of those, and you like it and you want more. So that was really, the only reason why people who smoke weed ended up doing harder things. But in my influential and susceptible youth and my entrepreneurial, eagerness to be successful and earn money, and I had a full-time job, but it really didn't deliver what I was hoping for. So friends wanted weed, I was smoking weed, I would get it for them, and then it moved into ecstasy with raving and methamphetamines. Methamphetamines was a big raving drug because it basically just gives you tons and tons of energy. There's the only reason why I can dance for 8 hours to hardcore techno was because I had some additional assistance. So I ended up, I wouldn't say it was big time, but it was probably the equivalent of about $250,000 a week in today's money. And it was actually quite simple. I literally on a Friday drove to Liverpool, picked up 15,000 pills, which at that time we bought them at £4.50 a pill, and I just took them straight to two different people. I divided them up, predominantly 14,000 to one guy and 1,000 to another guy. The 14,000, I made a pound a pill. So I made £14,000, which should have been back then, $28,000. When I was 19. And putting it in today's money, you're probably looking at least 4 times that just on that one transaction. And then, I sent 1,000 to my friend in Leeds, who I did them at £9 a pill. So, I made a good chunk off that as well. Because they sold for £15 to £20 back then. And I then actually had a big nightclub that I went to, which housed about 8,000 people. I was a dancer at that time, yes. A lot of people don't realise that I used to dance on stage to hardcore techno. On many clubs, I'd be on the stage getting the crowd going and things like that. That would get a lot of people talking to me and coming up to me and dancing with me and things like that, which was a very good networking opportunity. And because I was a pretty wild, everybody like, what the fuck's he on? As in raving. And obviously I would let them know. And I used to sell, probably 300 or 400, in the club, at 15, 20s each. And I was still buying them at the 4.5s. So it was a pretty lucrative endeavour. Obviously pretty dangerous. And there was a number of occasions, there was, where, I just had the ability to spot the other players in the club. It was just a natural radar. Nobody could follow me. My anti-surveillance tactics were second to none. If a car followed me more than 2 turns, I would literally do U-turns or go around the roundabout twice and going off in the wrong direction, all that kind of stuff. You become, if you ever, kind of get into that trade, hyper aware of your surroundings. You need to be. It's a survival instinct. You need to understand the dynamics of the room and who's there and what their intentions are. And I remember one incident when it was my my wife or wife-to-be at the times. She worked for Mixmag, and she did reviews of clubs. So she'd go out to a club and would enjoy the club, and then she'd write a review on it. Also, as to kind of leverage that opportunity, she did flyers. So at the end of the night, we would hand out flyers, and we would obviously get paid, for both of those. Now, actually, on this night, I wasn't doing anything else, but I'd actually recently acquired, a pretty good new source of methamphetamines, which was one of my favourite party drugs, because literally you just had fucking supersonic energy for like hours and hours on end. When you're dancing to hardcore techno, as I said before, you need some kind of assistance, unless you're a bloody triathlon athlete or something daft like that. And when I was in this club, I just, again, my radar was out. I was kind of seeing the players, and it got to the point where these people noticed me noticing them. Now, the one challenge that I'd had is, and again, some certain drugs and things like that bring out these incredible spatial awareness. Methamphetamine speeds up your thought processes. It makes you, incredibly responsive. And you process things, quite often at a higher level, depending on, how you take it. And there's a number of factors involved. I'm not promoting this, by the way. I'm not advising it. It's something that I've not done. God, I don't think I've done that since a teenager. So, decades ago. But I'd actually got this stuff which was just mind-blowing, and you can mix it. I usually did it with glucose, and that's how you kind of make your money. You buy an ounce of it, for a few hundred, whatever. You mix it with other stuff, and then you sell each ounce for a few hundred, whatever, and you're multiplying your money. That's generally how it works. One of the biggest problems with drugs and their damage to you is usually what more unscrupulous people mix the drugs with. I've seen some terrible things, washing powders and shit like that. This is the problem in the industry. This is why ultimately the industry needs to be cleaned up. A lot of pure, really high-grade pharmaceutical drugs just don't have the physical impact on the body that black market ones do. You don't get the violence and all the problems. This is, probably my political stance, even though it wouldn't increase my intake of them. I believe that it would sort out a lot of problems if, the world started looking at these things. It's not the war on drugs, it's the war on how it is, dominated and manipulated by, bad people. In Portugal, all drugs are legal, and they don't have anywhere near the problems. Same with Amsterdam, with a lot of drugs being legal there. Psychedelics. We're just opening up psychedelics in the US, in certain states being legal. Although there's a few interesting ambiguities. It's legal, but it's legal to buy. Well, how does that work then? Anyway, but I digress. So I was in this club, and I noticed me being noticed, and Kerry Ann, my wife to be at the time, was totally oblivious to it. And we were outside, and I kind of saw what was happening. I got outside, and we were handing out flyers, and the guy which I had worked out was the ringleader kind of walked up to me, and he's like, how you doing? And so that moment, I knew it was my opportunity to say what I needed to say to be able to diffuse the situation. So I just acted totally fucking off my head. I was like, fuck yeah. I had got some fucking amphetamines, and I actually took the wrong batch. I took a gram of the pure, and I should have been able to cut it 12 to 1, so I'm the equivalent of 12 grams of fucking speed. And I've been up for 2 days, I'm paranoid as fuck, and I think everybody at the club's been looking at me. I feel like I'm gonna get jumped or fucking stabbed or something like that, you know what I mean? And my girlfriend here is doing a review of the club, and we're handing out flyers, and and he kind of laughed and shook my hand, and he went, "Stand down, boys." And there was 2 guys behind me, and I saw them put a knife back away in the pocket. And he says, yeah, you were just about to have a bad night, he says, but you're all right. Shook my hand and they all walked off. So it was just that, having that intuitive ability to know what to do in that moment to be able to diffuse that extreme situation. That's an extreme version of it, but things like this happened on a regular basis. I just kind of knew intuitively what to do and what to say to people to change their perspective. I could see their perspective, and if it was wrong and not healthy for me, then I could say the right thing and help change that. But it was also very dysfunctional in many ways. In business, again, I told you in the first video about my dysfunction around using my gifts for money. The way money blocks present themselves quite often is you'll have an inkling, you'll kind of have a feeling about somebody that something's not right. But there's a phrase, give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah? Don't do that. If there's one piece of advice that you take away from this video is don't give people the benefit of doubt. Yeah? Because, excuse my French, but it'll fuck you in the end every time. My first probably major business partner when I was 2021. I had a few very intense situations on my last financial endeavor and business entrepreneurial pursuit, which I was just mentioning. There was a few very, very big players which were telling me that I was working for them, and if not, they were going to come and kill my family. And these people had track records for doing it. I knew people tell me stories about this guy that someone owed him money and didn't pay it, so he actually broke into the house, tied his mother and father up, and tortured both his mother and father in front of him and him in front of his mother and father. And this is one of the guys that told me that I'm going to work for him, and I had to be there at a certain time and things like that. That was an interesting night. I slept in my bed with a freshly sharpened knife under my pillow, just in case. Although I wouldn't advise that, because I did eventually fall asleep, and I do like to sleep with my hand under the pillow and I cut my hand open. Which was a bit silly. But it never turned up, because, I back then always operated very incognito. Nobody knew my first name. I only used a nickname, and nobody knew my first and last name ever. So it was after those couple of events and another very interesting happening. I'm going to put all this in my book anyway, because I had some very interesting times doing that. I got into a situation where I was held up by machete and some toilets in a place in Manchester, and robbed, and I got out of that situation in quite an interesting way. So I've got many stories which are going to be in my book, which I'm going to write about this, which again, it's just that inner knowing of what to do in those situations. And this is why, there's not a great deal that phases me these days. I've seen some, I've seen my death quite a number of times, and I've stared at it and not been fazed by it. So I've always seen myself as an eternal being, and I've always believed I'm here for a reason. I am here for a bigger cause, and I had no fear of death, because I believed that when I've done what I'm come here to do, I'll die, and then I'll come back. I've always believed in reincarnation as well, in many ways, which has been confirmed to me in kind of different ways, which I'll talk about in future videos, in my latter years. So being really in touch, and that's when I was really in flow. But it was when I came out of that, when I was a teenager, I was, really on fire. I would, I'd have so many different women chasing after me, and I was an incredibly desirable person from the feedback I got. And it was in many ways when I came out of that kind of sector, to want for a better word, and I moved into more conventional businesses. When I was 21, when I was 20, I was kind of working as a salesman. As I said, one of the things that I was very good is being a salesman. Again, because I could read people. I sold to the person. And when I say sold to the person, often I didn't sell at all. When I remember when I was kind of 20, leading up to, when I set my first business up, my kind of first official one, I worked for a property renovation company. They did all sort of like remedial repair work, damp proofing, repointing, repair work to buildings. And I would go in and I'd have my appointment and I'd sit there and talk about life, the universe, the picture, the cat, the dog, and just go off on all sorts of tangents of conversation. And often, very often, it would be like 20 minutes, half an hour later, people are like, what was it you came here for again, right? They'd almost forgotten why I was there, but we'd made such good friendship. I was like, right, yeah, it was through, just for the damp proofing. It's like, oh yeah, no, I know I've got a problem with that. That back wall's really bad. I've been kind of thinking about doing it. Can you price it up? Let's get it done. And I'd already closed them before I'd even mentioned the product that I'm selling. People buy from people, ultimately. This video that I'm doing now, some of the content that I am talking about is going to trigger people and switch people off and make them judge me. If he's a person like that, I can't possibly work with him. And I was a person like that 28 years ago. I've reincarnated myself so many times since then, it's ridiculous. So if you're judging me, for the person I was last year, you're going to be totally out. Because this is what self-development's all about. It's about reinventing yourself. It's about recognizing who you are in this moment in time and how being like that impacts on your life, on your surroundings, and people around you, and then choosing and having the discernment to be able to mold that and shape that and change that and modify that to be a better person, more loving, more kind, more generous, more warm, so on and so forth. But everything shapes us. We cannot regret our past. We cannot lament what we have done if we are to fully love who we are. All those experiences shaped my experience. They gave me, learning. They gave me understanding. They showed me what my gifts were and what I could do. So when we fine-tune those skills and we then apply them in a different direction, it gives us that confidence in, what we are doing. So when I moved into that, I was the top salesman at this one particular branch of this company. We had a couple of branches. And this guy called Warren Layton was the top salesman at the other branch. And he was in Nottingham, I was in Leicester. And Nottingham, was a bigger city, a little bit more affluent, and he was always just pipping me in sales, for the month. We were always both top salespeople, but his just like volume was just always just slightly more for me, and it just always kind of drove me to do better. And then one day he approached me and he said, look, I'm looking at setting up my own business, doing this by myself. I'd love for you to come and be my sales manager. And I was like, well, if I'm going to kind of come and take that risk, then, I know what I can do. I know the amount of sales that I'm going to bring in. So I don't want to be a sales manager. I want to be a partner of it. Now, one challenge that I had at the time is, yes, I was earning a lot of money, but I was spending a lot of money. I didn't have that financial acumen to be able to build money. And this is, again, a sign of a financial block in some ways, is spending more than you earn. And I had a wife at that time then, which her core skill in life was spending more money than I earned. Her self-admission was all she wanted to be was this made not self-kept, but made and kept woman. That, she wanted the footballer lifestyle where did absolutely nothing and just had this amazing life. The challenge was I was at the beginning of business, and while money was good, it wasn't footballer money, and she kind of experienced a bit of the money because I met her while I was raving, and obviously I was making money there. I've got a few stories around that too. So although I was making money and it was coming in and it was just going out, so I wasn't kind of accruing any money, and he was putting the money up to set the business up, buy all the equipment, buy vans and all that kind of stuff. So in the negotiations, I became a 25% shareholder of the company. He had 75%. And we made agreements about how we were going to operate. We were both going to go out selling. We'd have the commissions from our sales, but then we'd have, the share of the profits. And I was the trainer, and I was setting up all the sales, the telesales and the field sales. And we had, I think about 20 telesales employees, including the office manager. We had about 8 field sales people out on the road. So we employed about, about 30 odd people. We had about 4 or 5 installers working for us. And we were doing good money. On average, our sales guys were probably doing about 3-4 grand a week in sales. They got, I think it was 15% commission. Back then, that was a lot of money. We're going back 28 years ago, 27 years ago. And their average conversions was like, I think I mentioned in my first video, they were converting like 1 in 4, 1 in 5. I was doing 1 in 1.4 to 1.8, depending on the week. For me, if you're a sales trainer, you want to be selling better than anybody else in the company by a significant margin. So you've got to kind of prove yourself. So that's what I did. And I set the bar, for people's conversions. And it was actually when I went into the company that I ended up destroying all of Warren's previous conversion ratios and all of his previous sales targets by a significant margin. And I think the confidence of being, confidence is everything, and confidence of being the company owner just put me in a different vibration. And it was, if there was a sale to be had, I was walking away with it. It was as simple as that. Because I didn't sell. I went out and made friends, and those friends, loved my company and loved the insights and, mind-blowing kind of conversations that we had, and just then wanted to give me the business. Now, the challenge is one thing that, with the background I had in my first entrepreneurial endeavor, I met some very, very dodgy people. But to some degree, I had to trust some of these very dodgy people, because most of the people in the industry were that way, and they wanted to make money, and they would deliver, and sometimes, and on quite a number of occasions, you'd end up getting ripped off. But the money was big, so it, c'est la vie in some cases. And again, it's that giving people the benefit of the doubt. I had a best friend back then, which I'll do another story about, and he ended up taking me for a real ride and ripping me off big time. And I saw it coming. I really saw it coming, but out of love and compassion and kindness and, giving people the benefit of the doubt, I watched it happen. Same with my business partner, this Warren Layton. He was just a scoundrel. He really was. And I ended up losing out big time because, I literally, he became a golf club director. In other words, he never came to work. He was either, he loved golf, so he was predominantly playing golf. He was off with his wife, and I was doing all the work. We agreed that actually for the first year we were both going to do it, but after 2 months of me killing it and bringing a load of sales and training a load of people and getting the business off, to an incredible start. In the first 2 months we ended up doing 20-30 grand a month, and we were round about 60% profit. After we'd paid everything out, so it was incredibly lucrative. So he just, major shareholder, he just decided, well, he felt like he could retire in many ways, which I didn't mind to some degree because I was making bills, I was making dollar, I was really, doing very well. I was going out at 8 in the morning, coming back at 11 at night, but I was, really turning some money, which is the one bit that kind of put a strain on my marriage and relationship. That's another lesson I'm going to tackle in a future video. There is a perspective that this is, what's his name? The guys are, you got to grind and you got to work every hour, and a real entrepreneur will be there till 4 in the morning and all that kind of stuff. There are times when you might have to do that, but it's just not sustainable. In fact, again, one of the stories that I'll be telling in my future, which is when I run my renewable energy company, that's when within the space of a year I pretty much lost all my hair. I went bald. I had a full head of hair at the beginning and, very wispy at the end. And it was the stress of putting in the hours which destroyed another relationship. But everything happens for a reason. But whether you utilize the reason is whether you learn and grow from it. So what happened is I was doing all the work, I was building the company, it was incredibly successful, he was doing incredibly well from the company as well, but we got to a point when ethics started creeping into play. We were coming up to our end of our first year of trading, and we were getting some clients that would kind of installed in the beginning of our endeavor, and some of the damp proofs that we'd installed hadn't really actually quite taken, and they needed redoing. And we'd obviously give a guarantee that we'd actually come back in a year's time, retest everything, and if there's any part of it that is still damp and therefore it's not taken, we would redo it. And Warren came to me and he says, look, now what we'll do is just give it a couple of months and we'll just palm them off a bit, because we're in a busy season, and when it quietens down, what we'll do is we'll close that business, set up in a different name, and we can, just renege on all the warranties. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. That's not who I am. For me, what better marketing and what better, strategy is to actually put us hands up and say, look, we've fitted some damp proofs a year ago, we came back as we promised a year later, we tested it, some of the walls were still damp, so we came back in and redid it, free of charge. For me, that is a testimonial that shows integrity of a company. You're admitting your faults, you're saying that you make mistakes. For me, I've always, from a very young age, I've said, I don't care what mistakes people make. I don't judge people by their mistakes. I judge people with how they put them right. Yeah? And for me, putting that right was me growing an ethical, honest, trustworthy company, which is what gets you even more sales. It's just, people like, yeah, they did it. They came back, they did what they said, they fixed it, and it's fine now. They'd recommend you to their friends because you're honest. But he wouldn't, and he would play the strong arm. Oh, well, I'm the shareholder, and I own the company, I make the decisions. This is what we're going to do. And there was quite a number of other factors that were going on as well at the time, which I'll probably cover in another. That'll be in my book as well. There'll be a lot more detail in the book. We had a few challenges with trading standards and this, that, and the other, which was kind of interesting. But I know my integrity. I always, even, people say, oh, how can you have integrity as a drug dealer? You're selling poison. And it's like, well, I didn't sell anything that I didn't take myself, and tested and made sure it was the highest quality possible and that I was happy with it. Yeah? Never put anybody at risk. And it was the same with a conventional business. I didn't want to be dishonest. I had sold a lot of those contracts. So I'd given my word that this is what we would do. And he wasn't budging. So my only option was to exit the company. I walked away. And again, I could have walked away and taken every single employee, because every single person that worked for him, I had trained and I had nurtured, and I'd give them all sorts of guidance to become the best people that they could possibly be. And, they really loved me and appreciated me. But I literally, one day, I made the decision, and I just knew it was right, and I walked away, and I contacted him. I contacted his solicitor, and I said, look, I'm dissolving the partnership. I don't agree with the decisions that you're making. These decisions that you're making will impact my integrity, and, how I'm perceived, in the future, and I refuse to go down that path. So therefore, I relinquish my shares in the company, I walk away, and, to keep my integrity, I'm not going to attempt to damage your company. Ultimately, I knew he was going to destroy it himself. I didn't need to damage his company, but I wasn't going to go poaching his staff, because, he started accusing me and, getting all paranoid and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And, I'm going to keep my integrity. I have been like that. I was brought up well. I was brought up to have values, to have integrity, to be honest, to be truthful, and do the right thing, even if nobody's looking. So I did. I walked away, and it was within round about a month to 6 weeks. Everybody found out what had happened. Nobody talked to me. I didn't speak to anybody, but everybody found out what happened and what he was doing and this, that, and the other, and everybody left. Within literally 6 weeks, he had no company left. I never knew what happened to him since then. But, I kind of wish him the best. I hope he pulled himself together and made an honest man of himself. And I hope he's doing well today. I've got no animosity towards him. We're all in our level of consciousness at that moment in time, dependent on all the experiences that have led up to them. One thing about, being a healer, Jesus in the Bible, not that I'm particularly religious, but I like to take bits from all of the different religious disciplines out there. But in the Bible it says, I forgive them because they know not what they do. What he was saying there in that moment is saying, look, these people are unconscious. They're following their programming. They're not coming from a space of full presence and love and compassion. They are following what they've been taught, the traumas, the problems, the societal pressure that they have to act and behave in a certain way by society. That's what they're conforming to. And he was just conforming to his conditioning from the environment and upbringing that he'd had. So, I'm always compassionate about, and I always have been in many ways. I've always trusted karma. I did a post before. Some people, I think it was Les Brown who said, some people spend more time trying to get even than trying to get ahead. And that resonated with me. That impacted me. The first time I started, listening to these audio tapes and, skim reading, these books was around about that time when I was about the 20 years old mark. I can't remember exactly when I got into Amway. I know it was when I was with, at the beginning of the relationship with my wife, which is when all of this was kind of happening. And I was coming away from that industry and looking for new ways of making money and becoming successful. And all of these things felt true to me. They felt real. They felt, in many ways, what my experience had been up until then. But I hadn't had any kind of formal outside source corroborate it. So this kind of really allowed me to be more present with how we manifest things in life. Because right from the beginning, I knew he was a dodgy fucker. I knew he was going to end up shafting me. I watched it happen and I watched it come. But self-sabotage makes you attract exactly what your beliefs are. And that belief, there's a scene in The Matrix, and I love to quote this bit because it is so apt. And it was when Neo goes in to visit the Oracle, and the Oracle says to him, "It's okay, don't worry about the vase." And Neo goes, "What vase?" And then knocks the vase off and smashes it. And he says to the Oracle, "How did you know I was going to break it?" And then the Oracle says, "Well, the bit that'll bake your noodle is whether you'd have broken it had I not mentioned it." So this is the fine line between destiny and manifestation. Are we intuitively predicting something's going to happen in the future? Or is our focus and energy on that manifesting that in the future? I don't think there's any way we could really discern between the two. I've done a lot of experiments on this, which I'll be covering in some further videos. So I intuitively knew how to get out of it, mainly following my ethics, and everything fell apart from him. And I know he had a lot of legal problems and this, that, and the other, but I just stayed away, had nothing to do with it. But one of my challenges that I learned over the years was I ended up choosing business partners that would always screw me over. And in many ways, this actually stemmed back to my father. Again, that first event when I was 5 years old, when he took my reward for using my intuition, using my gift, using my clairsentience, my empathic abilities, and sensing what this other person needed, and then being rewarded for it. And in all my businesses, I saw all the problems coming, but never did anything about it, because I thought optimism would win out in every occasion, but that optimism was far too clouded with my pessimism. And whether I just saw their character and that's where it ended, or whether my confirmation bias created that situation, who knows? But the long and short of it is the feedback that happened is my business partners ripped me off. And that happened again, later in life, significantly with my father. When, I set up various companies, and I did sales training and set up sales initiatives for big companies like ADT, and did incredibly well, but ended up getting shafted, getting my processes stolen from me. And there was always somebody that would see the incredible idea that I have and then steal it, who was in a better position to be able to implement it, mainly because I would do well and I'd spend the money, and I never really had anything of substance behind me to do my own thing. I was always on the back foot, and this was always because of this deep emotional block about not being allowed to have my own money. And after a number of businesses, I decided to go off by myself and do my own thing, which again, I created a lot of success. One was a car audio business, which I gained a lot of notoriety within the industry. I actually gained a world record. So I'm a world record holder for creating the largest seismic event using car audio. This was done with a car magazine and a couple of other shops, so it's kind of a joint effort, not just myself, but it was a number of my customers there as well. And was when kind of the whole industry changed, and the whole economy changed around about 2008, I think it was. Around there. There was a big economic depression, and people just stopped spending money on the cars. Also, the scene changed. The Too Fast, Too Furious had come out, and the scene just modified into a load of what we call chavs over here. You'd call them, what am I looking for? When they, like Eminem when he lived in the trailer park, trailer park trash, things like that. We call them chavs over here. Similar sort of thing, maybe not quite exactly the same, but from impoverished backgrounds, and they would attempt. They would have their Peugeot 106, and it would have Nismo and HKS shopping lists down the back of it, and these absolutely god awful, terrible Japanese bumpers on French cars and stuff like that, and it just destroyed the scene. It took all the class out of it, and the people with money decided to go down the modifying route, and they were stripping out the cars and making them faster, and spending the money there rather than filling it up with audio. They were looking at security, and it changed into an industry I wasn't interested in anymore. And again, one of the biggest lessons that I learned in life, really one of the biggest lessons, was in self-development. They teach you that it's tenacity, it's going the extra mile. And in some cases that's correct. It is tenacity. Steve Jobs said, look, it's hard, and you have to be passionate about what you're doing. Without passion, you're not going to succeed, because it's tough. And if you're not passionate about it, it will grind you down. Not those words exactly, but it was along those lines. And I was passionate about audio, and I'd listened to all the tapes and everything like that, and it was like, yeah, there's always room at the top, and there's always people that'll be successful. So I kept going and going and going, and shops were closing everywhere, and I was like, yeah, well, they're closing, which means more business for me. You know what? The biggest lesson I learned was being able to know when you're flogging a dead horse. There's a phrase, stop flogging a dead horse. If it's fucking dead, it's not going to take you anywhere. Yeah? You ain't going to be able to use that horse to pull your cart anywhere. It's dead. And if the industry's died, it's time to morph and change. The survival of the fittest it's our ability to adapt, which is the survival of the fittest. And our ability to adapt, both physically evolutionary, comes on micro evolutions within economic situations. And it's the people that are able to diversify and change their business model which survive. The ones that are too rigid, look at what's the video ones? What was it called? The video rental company where you went and bought your videos. I'm sure someone's going to shout it out. Netflix took over because everything went online, and they just, as a dinosaur, stayed in that space, and it died a death. I think Toys R Us went down the same route. Online sales just took over physical shops. And this is what's morphing now. The big change that's going on at the moment is big industries are taking over small industries just because of closing down small shops and small enterprises. But online sales are just rocketing. People can't go anywhere. I can't go to the shops. So I've got to sit in front of my computer. All I've got is my phone. And you can access the world from your phone. So you can buy it from there. Things are still being delivered. This is how I've been able to become a digital nomad and literally work from anywhere on the planet that I want to be. Although when lockdown came, I decided to orchestrate me being locked down in Bali. Such a shame. And I get to stay in beautiful villas. It's my master bedroom up there with a beautiful outdoor hot tub and seating area and I've got a video on my timeline showing you a bit more about this beautiful property. I mean, this place in peak time, it was $500 a day to stay in. Fortunately, I've negotiated a bit of a better rate. But being able to work digitally gives you a lot of freedom. I manufacture very high-end, beautiful jewelry. It's all made by the master Balinese carvers, and I pay them incredibly well, better than quite a lot of people out there, because I want them to enjoy the success of the business as well. My biggest sole purpose, and funnily enough, this is the sole purpose amulet. My sole purpose is to awaken and enlighten and, heal as many people on this planet as possible. And using shamanic tools, using my subconscious surgery, and all the different technologies I'm kind of developing in the background, which will be introduced later. And working digitally, my only challenge here is time zone. At this moment in time, I think we're middle of the afternoon. In the US, it's the middle of the night. There's when the clocks are in alignment, there's a minimum of a 12-hour difference from here to the East Coast, and it's up to 15 hours on the West Coast. At the moment, it's 16 and 13 hours because your clocks have gone back and ours haven't yet. I don't even know when they go back, which is incredibly confusing. So being able to modify and diversify, again, it's your intuition. It is inspiration. When you feel inspired to do something, you've got to follow that inspiration. The word inspiration comes from the ancient Latin word inspire. It means to be breathed on by God, or to be in spirit. And I'm going to be doing a future video, because I'm going to kind of cover that subject individually. I think I've been talking long enough as it is now, although I could probably talk forever. And I throughout my whole life, I have had visions of business ideas, of products, of processes, years, sometimes decades before they actually came out, and never did anything about it. And there's a lot of people out there that believe they had a great idea, never did anything about it, and then it comes and goes, and they think, oh well, I've missed the train. No, right? There's a different way of looking at this. This was you seeing your gift of being a visionary. Yeah? And if you're a visionary, you can carry on having visions. To some degree, it does seem to have a personality that if it gives you a load of inspirational ideas and visions and you don't follow them, it almost goes, well, fuck you then, I'm not going to give you them anymore. And it kind of slows them down, and I've had that on a number of occasions in my life. So, kind of to wrap it up on this video, part 2, and there'll be many parts to come, is being fully present in your life, taking full responsibility for all your choices, all your decisions, all your actions, and only using hindsight, not to look at all the bad mistakes that you did, but from a different perspective, to look at all the choices you made and the outcomes that came upon it, and your intuitive thoughts that you had around those choices. Because so many times we will look back and we'll go, I knew that was going to happen. I knew they were going to do that. I knew that was going to come out on top. I knew that was going to fall apart. Yet you chose the opposite. And if that is the case, the chances are you have an emotional belief system, what we call this blockage, which is preventing you from embodying and trusting and going with that and letting the great opportunity go, because you know it's going to be a load of crap. Yeah? The challenge is people often do that, and it was amazing. And that shows a different kind of block, where you're blocking success, right? And I'm going to be doing a training program in the new year, and I'm going to be doing a few videos over the next week, talking about the process that I developed, how I got involved with this, how I found it in the first place, and then how I experimented with it over several years, kind of trying to find out, is this real or not? Is this possible? And then developed it into what I now call subconscious surgery and these testing frameworks to be able to tap into source and ask it a question and get real, tangible, trustable answers that you can rely on and move forward upon. And how I, got to where I am now with having, one of the best opportunities in my life, having several million worth of stock of one of the most rarest and most powerful and beautiful crystals I've ever encountered in my life, and meeting millionaires and billionaires that want to support me and help me with some of my amazing projects. And it's all down to the testing. 3 years ago, I took caution to the wind because there was no more caution. I'd found out that if I test something and the testing says this, that's what's going to happen. And if I just follow the testing and trust it implicitly, life unfolds in a beautiful way in front of you. And that's what I want to share with you. And I'm going to be doing a full training program in the new year to give you this gift and help you tap into your intuition and really upgrade and accelerate the evolution of your life and success.